Alrighty guys, well, welcome to the first YouTube video on the Simple Strength Training YouTube channel. So we're gonna start things off today with warm-ups. So how do we warm up? Or first of all, why do we warm up? And then secondly, how do we warm up? Or what do we think about when we're picking exercises, movements, and stretches to incorporate in our warm-up? So firstly, why do we warm up? We warm up first and foremost to increase our core body temperature and to move our body through full ranges of motion. We want to prepare our body. If we're working out, we're typically using an external load, so we're using resistance of some kind, like a kettlebell, a dumbbell, maybe resistance bands. So we want to prepare our body for both weighted movements and explosive movements. And the best way to do this is to pick exercises that are unloaded and to move our body through full ranges of motion. Usually when I'm training clients, they're either coming in to work out first thing in the morning, so they've been ideally sleeping for 8 hours, in which case they've been sedentary, or they're coming in first thing when they get off of work, in which case they've probably been sitting for 8 hours. So either way, they've probably been stationary for a long period of time leading up to their workout, so a very effective warm-up is going to be crucial. Now, how do we warm up? We want to think about using the joint by joint approach. This is, I've found, the best way to make an all-encompassing warm-up, so we're checking off all our boxes and we're warming up the body as efficiently as possible. And all the joint by joint approach is an approach to movement or warming up in which we're picking exercises that reinforce either mobility or stability in a given joint in the body. So for example, the ankles, we require mobility in the ankles. So we want to pick exercises that reinforce mobility of the ankles. So we're gonna go through the entire body and kind of check off all the boxes. We're gonna go through each joint. We're gonna decide whether that joint needs mobility or stability, and then we are going to go through some movements that can reinforce either mobility or stability in a given joint. So starting down at the ankles are a joint that requires mobility. We want very mobile. We want a lot of range of motion in the ankle joint in both eversion, inversion, and flexion, both dorsiflexion and plantar flexion. So I like to think about using both static and dynamic and compound exercises when doing this. So for example, a static exercise that would promote, let's say, dorsiflexion in the ankle joint, so the basically toes being moved up towards the shin bone, we can do something as simple as a static calf stretch. Now, a dynamic variation of this could be the same thing, but we could do more of a dynamic or a rocking calf stretch to accomplish this range of motion or reinforce this range of motion in the ankle. Now, a compound variation could be something as simple as a lateral lunge. This is going to be a compound movement, so we're using multiple joints at the same time, but it's also a movement that requires a lot of range of motion from the ankle joint. Now, moving up to the knee joint. So fortunately for us, the joints kind of alternate. As we move up the body, the joints are going to alternate in what they require. So as we go from a mobile ankle, we're going to go to a stable knee joint. So with the knee, we want to think about incorporating exercises that reinforce stability in the knee. And for this, it's pretty simple. Simply put, any exercise that is done on one leg is going to require the knee to be stable. So we can incorporate anything like a single leg squat, a single leg deadlift, or any variation of an exercise that is going to be done on one leg. This is going to reinforce stability in the knee joint. Now, moving up to the hip joint. The hip joint is a very mobile joint, so we want to think about reinforcing hip extension and hip rotation in the hip joint. So to reinforce hip extension, a great exercise, and I say this nonstop, is the couch stretch. This is an amazing exercise to reinforce or promote hip extension, and this will set us up for a very effective workout when we do loaded exercises such as deadlifts or glute bridges that require efficient or adequate hip extension. Now, moving on to hip rotation, we can incorporate exercises such as 90-90. So this is going to be a great passive hip stretch that is going to both stretch our hips in both external and internal rotation. We can also do active variations of this, so variations where we have to use our muscles to get that range of motion. So doing active or alternating 90-90s or exercises like hip circles are great options for this. Now, as we move up to the torso, we're going to start at the lumbar spine. So essentially the portion of our spine that makes up our low back. We want this area to be as stable as possible. So when we're thinking about exercises to incorporate here, we want to think about exercises that require stability from the core, and this is going to stabilize the lumbar spine. So something as simple as a bird dog, or we can do a dead bug, or any crawl variation are really good baseline exercises to get that core stability going before you move on to heavier loaded movements that require core stability. Now, as we move up the spine, we're going to move to the thoracic spine. So the thoracic spine is the portion of our spine from our mid-back to the base of our neck. And this portion of the spine is basically the opposite of the lumbar spine. This is a portion of the spine that requires a lot of mobility, both in rotation as well as flexion and extension. So to reinforce flexion and extension, one of my favorites is just a basic cat-cow. If you've ever done a yoga class or anything like that, you've probably experienced these before. Also rotation. So how do we reinforce rotation? This can be done both passively and actively. So a passive example, or an example of rotation that would have gravity helping you, would be a side-lying T-spine rotation where you're letting gravity really help pull your shoulders apart, or pull your hands apart to get some rotation in that thoracic spine. And then a great active example would be a march and twist. So this is an exercise where you are marching either in place or you're walking as you march on one leg, and then you are rotating or twisting towards your top leg. This is also a great example of an exercise that checks off a lot of boxes at one time. So we're getting a single leg exercise, so we're getting some knee stability there, and we're also getting rotation in the thoracic spine. So we're getting T-spine rotation. So it kind of checks off two boxes at once. And now lastly, as we move up to our shoulder joint, both our scapula and our glenohumeral joint, we want to think about reinforcing stability in our scapula or our shoulder blade. So this can be done a number of different ways. A couple of my favorites are scapula push-ups. These can be done from the feet in a push-up position or from the knees, as well as doing any kind of prone position, T or Y. This is going to be a great active mobility drill, as well as a scapula stability drill. And then lastly, the glenohumeral joint, or more commonly known as the shoulder joint. This is a very mobile joint, so similar to the hips, there's a lot of mobility in the shoulder, so we want to reinforce mobility. This can be done in a few different ways. We can do dead hangs. That's one of my favorite. This one you kind of have to be a little careful with, because some people who have maybe very limited range of motion in their shoulders, or who have a shoulder impingement, this can be a little tricky. So unless you have very limited range of motion, unless you have just a little bit of range of motion issues, this is a great option. But if you have very stiff shoulders, I would start with something more like a foam roller, lat stretch, or an assisted dead hang to kind of ease your way into it. All right, now that we know what joints require mobility and what joints require stability, now we basically have the framework for how to make an effective warm-up. So now we can go through and pick exercises that check all those boxes. So if you want a basic outline for a warm-up, pick 7 movements that check off all those boxes. And remember, you can pick movements that check off multiple boxes at the same time, and you are on track to have or be set up for both an effective and safe workout going forward. So I hope you guys got some good information and some good value from this video. If you liked it, go ahead and like the video down below, maybe throw a comment in there. And if you guys want to see more content like this, go ahead and comment down below what kind of content you want going forward. So I will catch you guys in the next video.